Well, hey there, Coach Andrew here. This is definitely going to be an advanced training for athletes who are serious about maximizing their potential on the court, on the field, wherever it is you play, and athletes who are serious about mastering up here so that they can win the mental game, which is the edge that you'll have over your competition. This is truly an advanced training because these 5 things that I'm going to share with you, the 5 habits of the world's best, it comes from a research study where this guy studied the top 100 tennis players in the entire world, right? Tennis is one of the most mental games you could ever play for a lot of reasons. And this guy studied the top 100 players, and what he found was there was a significant difference between the top 50 and then the bottom 50. Now think about this. The bottom 50 were actually still incredible athletes. They were great players because they were in the top 100, but he found that there was this really big difference between the happiness, the success, the longevity, the passion that the top 50 had versus the bottom 50. You see, they all achieved a lot and accomplished a lot, but the top 50 just, they did it differently and they did it at a higher level and they sustained it over a long period of time. And so he found that there was 5 things that really separated the top 50 from the bottom 50, and I'm about to walk you through those now. Pause. As an athlete, do not go try to apply all 5 of these right away because you don't need to. It's likely that you haven't applied many of these at all consistently, and if you just pick 1 or 2, you'll be a drastically different performer. All right, so the first thing that the top 50 did differently than the bottom 50, or than players 51 through 100, was they were very intentional about their walking pace. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say that the player had a really tough volley and they lost the set, right? Let's say they were just really performing poorly, they weren't in the zone. Well, if the player was really worked up during that time and they were anxious and they were just like too high, then what they did to get themselves back down was they slowed down their walking pace. Think about it, it makes sense, right? If you walk slowly, then naturally you come back to center and you calm yourself down so that you can be in your sweet spot. But most of the time when we're worked up and we're anxious, we let our walking pace reflect that, right? If we're anxious and worked up and just too high, then we walk like that and then it just makes it worse, right? So the top 50, they used their walking pace to their advantage. On the flip side, if they were too sluggish, you ever come out of the gates and you're just slow, you're not really pumped up enough, your energy's low. If they were like that, then they actually used their walking pace to speed them up, right? They would walk back from the baseline. And here's the crazy thing about all 5 of these. The top 50 players in the world, they did it in between the points. Every single one of these things happened in between the points. It was the only difference between the top 50 and the bottom 50 was how they acted in between points, which if you think about it, that's just 15 seconds. 15 seconds between points. And so between the points is where the key is. So they walked back to the baseline slow to slow themselves down or quickly to get themselves pumped up. Second thing they did very differently in between the points was focus on their breathing rate. Same thing as walking pace. If they were too worked up and anxious and just flustered, then they would breathe nice and deep, long breaths in order to bring themselves back down. If they were too sluggish and just not really in it, just blah, then they would speed their breath up. Try not to blow in the camera too hard or blow in the microphone too hard. So they use their breathing rate to their advantage. Have you ever done that before? If you were sluggish, did you ever actually use your breathing to get you pumped up, right? This is pretty cool stuff. The third thing they did very differently and very intentionally in between points was eye contact. If they had a bad play, and think about this, if you're a basketball player, there's a timeout. Well, you've got 45 seconds. You can use this. If you're a basketball player and there's a jump ball, right? There's 10 seconds maybe in between plays. Or there's an inbounds play coming up and there's 10 seconds in between plays. Well, the best players in the world that play tennis, but it applies to every sport, they, in between points, they would always look to the same spot, right? Steph Curry, every time he makes a 3, he taps his chest and looks up, right, to God. Maybe for you, it's a parent in the stands, or it's somebody that just brings you confidence, if it's a friend. Or maybe it's just a point on the wall. Maybe it's a window. Maybe it's something that you can consistently look at that gets you in the zone So they were very specific with their eye contact, which is just fascinating. The fourth thing that they were very intentional about was their self-talk. If they had a bad volley, they messed up, they weren't doing too well, they had something that they said to themselves in different situations, in different scenarios. Let's say they were really nervous before the final set, right? It was clutch, it was crunch time, they needed to be clutch. Well, they had something that they would say to themselves in those moments, and it worked every time, right? They would say it to themselves predictably. How intentional are you with your self-talk in between points? Before a game, after you mess up, at the end of a game when the pressure situation is on, when coach pulls you out? What's your self-talk like? Do you have words that you can go to or phrases you can go to in those moments? The best players in the world, they know what they're going to say to themselves, because if they don't choose their self-talk will choose them, and that's oftentimes not a great thing. And then the last thing that the best players in the world did differently, you got to keep this in mind. The reason why this is advanced stuff is because you don't become the best in the world by doing what everyone else does, right? You got to do something different. Posture. Their heads were never down. The top 50 in the world, when they got frustrated, they didn't put their head down. Their shoulders didn't slump forward. They didn't walk to the baseline like this. They were consistent with how they carried themselves. Whereas players 51 through 100, they weren't as consistent. They didn't actually focus on this. They let this be dictated by how they were playing. When things were great, their posture was great. When things were bad, their posture was bad. Don't make that mistake. You got to act the way you want to feel, and then you will feel the way you acted. Act the way you want to feel, then you will feel the way you acted. So out of these 5, I want you to take a second, write down the 1 or the 2 that you're like, you know what? That's mine. I'm doing that starting today, and I'm going to practice it for the next 3 months until I master it, and then I'm going to pick another one. This is what the best in the world do differently. I hope you go take this information, use it to be the best player that you can be today. Honor your progress. Be happy with where you're at. Don't be content, or don't be complacent. Be content. Don't be complacent, and keep working towards a better version of yourself. I'll see you guys in the next training.